Thank you, doctor. That was wonderful. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Andrew Kaufman. He is a medical doctor who is asking the questions that other doctors should have asked. He is the co-author of the Statement on Virus Isolation, along with Sally Fallon Morell and Dr. Tom Cowan. So welcome, Dr. Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina, for organizing this, and to all the other people who helped make this happen. And Tom, I'm not so thankful because you're a tough act to follow. But I'm going to try to actually cover really the same kind of material to really help it sink in and explain it in my slightly different way. So hopefully my slides are working. So what we're really talking about here is, does this virus exist, and why is this the most important question to ask? So there's been an extraordinary claim made, right, that there's the most dangerous epidemic illness or pandemic illness that the world's seen in 100 years, and we're all going to die if we don't act really quickly, right? That's a pretty big claim. That whole thing is driven by a microscopic particle that's invisible. So what we're simply doing is looking at, well, is there evidence to support that? And if not, then we can actually take the whole thing and toss it aside. Sorry, I'm hung up here. I'm going to try not to trip myself too much. Okay. So, Tom mentioned a few times that people make a variety of arguments about this issue to try to debunk us or say that what we're saying is wrong. And what he gave an example of is in the category of logical fallacies. And so when you're discussing these issues, it's important that you're aware of these and pay attention and monitor, because these are actually not an argument or a discussion on the point. These are a way to subvert an argument or discussion, and they happen very commonly when we just talk with people. And I think the most common one that I'm subjected to, and probably Tom as well, is ad hominem. In other words, attacking our character or our qualifications, rather than let's talk about these experiments that prove the existence of a virus. It's also important that when you look at published science that you understand the context, and this comes from the scientific mainstream community itself. One of the world's leading epidemiologists, probably Professor Ioannidis from Stanford, who wrote this article, one of the most widely cited papers in the research literature, right, stating outright that more than half of all the papers, you can take their conclusions and know that they're false. So that means when you read a scientific study, and this is even more critical if you look at the media reporting of a scientific paper, right, which is how most of us find out about these scientific studies, that most likely that paper is going to be false. So when you read it, you have to read it from a point of skepticism so that you can know, is this one you can trust or not? And when it comes to reading papers in virology, you know that that's where they all are, is on the false side. All right, that's what Tom and I have discovered. So the virus is the root cause of all of the tyranny, all of the things that have been impeding our freedoms and messing with our lives over the past year and a half. And without addressing this root cause, you're not going to be able to deal with all of those other aspects. Okay, so now we'll get into the experiments, and I'm going to explain them once again. So we'll start off with, this is the way that you would actually isolate a virus properly, like that has been done with bacteriophages, as Dr. Cowan described. So, starting off with a sick person with the alleged disease, taking their fluid, separating it out. And then this is the actual purification, where you have this dashed line as the purified virus. And you can see, now these are bacteriophages, which have been successfully isolated. And you see that they're all identical in size and shape. They have this unique hexagonal head with a tail, right? And you see, that's the only thing you see in the entire visual field of the microscope. And if you were able to zoom out, that would still be all you would see. And they're all the same. Okay, so that's how you know you have one thing. Now, the kind of experiments they can do once they have this purified, isolated particle is they can actually take the genetic material out of those particles. They can examine what they're made of, right? They can even do physical testing on them, right? Say, do they fall apart when you heat them, or mechanical stress? You could do all kinds of things, right? Because you actually have a thing now that you can study. Now, this was, I don't know if we're going to have the sound, but this is Luc Montagnier, who is a Nobel.
Well, to make sure you have a real virus,
Everybody hear that? So, no problem. I knew this might be difficult, but so that's Luc Montagnier, who's won the Nobel Prize for allegedly discovering HIV, which he didn't really do, but this is him being asked, what is the purpose of purifying the virus out of the body fluid, right, which is what I just described. And he said, to show that it's a real virus. Without that, you can't demonstrate that, okay? So when you do that experiment to show a real virus with the purification, you also have to do a control experiment, because there's a basic principle when you do scientific experiments that the method of the experiment that you choose could actually produce the false outcomes that would mislead you. So in order to test that, you always do the experiment, but without the thing that you're testing. Or you'd use a known. So in this case, right, what are we testing? We're testing the fluid of the lung. That is there a virus in it that's going to cause cell damage, or that could be purified. So we would have to choose lung fluid from someone who doesn't have the possibility of having a virus, right? Like a person who's not sick, for example, or maybe someone who's sick with a non-virus disease, like they have lung cancer or they have asthma, right? And that would be a good control, because we shouldn't expect to find a virus in those samples. So if we do, that means it came from somewhere in the experiment and not from the thing we're testing. Okay, so this is how you do that. You have a healthy person, and you take, sorry, my slides are not working perfectly. So you have the healthy person, you take their fluid, run it through the same purification, and then basically you see nothing, right? Because there's no virus. Okay, so now let's see what they actually do. We're going to talk about these. I put isolation in quotes because it's not actual isolation. But what we have here is, you see, same kind of process, except instead of purifying it up here, it's added to a tissue culture, generally foreign cells like monkey kidney cells, but they sometimes use human epithelial cells or lung cancer cells. They put this on a starvation diet, so severe starvation. They add toxic antibiotics. Fetal calf serum is actually, it is another source of particles and genetic material, but it actually provides nutrition in this case, because they took the regular nutrition that they grow these cells in, which is generally known as culture medium. And that would be, you know, like kind of like the all-you-can-eat buffet style. And then they transform that into like the bathing suit diet, and then they took that down by 1/10. And the bathing suit diet was so poor, they added like some of that, nutritional shakes, like, what do they call those? I forget. But Ensure, yeah, they added some Ensure to it, right, which is like the fetal calf serum, okay? So they do this tissue culture until they see the cytopathic effects, CPEs, as Tom pointed out, and that is damage to the cells in the culture. And this, you don't need an electron microscope to see the damage to the cells, because these are cells from mammals. They're much, much bigger than virus particles. They're on the order of a millionth of a meter rather than a billionth. And so you could see these in a regular microscope, and this is how they look. And you'll have to take my word for it on that. Okay, so when they do these viral experiments, they don't do a control, right? As Tom said, although they sort of did a control back in the 50s with Ender one time and found that they showed very similar particles to measles when they didn't have a sample from a measles patient, okay? But now we have Dr. Lanka has actually conducted these experiments for the first time properly. Sorry, this is the same paper on the kidney that Tom presented. So here's how Dr. Lanka did the control experiment. The same cell culture, same starvation diet, same antibiotics, same fetal calf serum, and then he showed the same cytopathic effects, the proof, alleged proof of the data from his experiments. So here's what the cell cultures look like before the experiment started. They're perfectly normal with the culture medium. Now this first column here, they didn't actually add the antibiotics or do the starvation at all. So you could see they continue to look like normal cell cultures. Now when you started to deplete the nutrition, so this is like moderate nutritional depletion like with the Ensure, you start to see damage. Okay, and I think you can see that these look quite different from here. Here, you know, it's filled up with cells and nuclei, right, wall to wall, because they're very healthy. Here you see gaps and you sort of see a little bit of streaking, and then it's more pronounced as you move to the right. So in this experiment, they did the full starvation diet and the poison diet, which is the antibiotics at 3 times their normal concentration, just like they do in these virus experiments. And you see CPEs. This one, they added yeast RNA, and that's actually for the purpose of an additional experiment that I'm going to talk about later with genetics. But so what they've done here is essentially this disproves modern virology, because this is the control experiment. The control experiment has the same results as the main experiment. That tells you that the results are due to the experiment and have nothing to do with the virus. So, since we've now proved actually quite conclusively that there is no such thing as a virus that causes disease, we know that there's no structure or composition of an imaginary virus, right? So there are spike proteins, you could buy them in a vial, but they don't come from this virus. Okay, and since they've never actually had the virus particles, they can't take the spike protein from something they don't have. Right, so it's completely made up, and I'll explain how later. There are no genetic variants or mutations. You can't have a variant of something that doesn't exist, obviously. There's no way to develop a test for something that doesn't exist. Not an accurate one. You can use a roulette wheel, which is what the PCR test really is. There's no way to demonstrate that it causes a disease if it doesn't exist. So everything really just falls completely apart, and then you can say, well, what are the reasons for all these other things? All right, I think that's it for this section. I'm gonna give it back to Tom now. Or actually, we're gonna take a break, correct? All right, thank you. I see.
You right? So, can you turn that off for a minute, and I'll tell you when to turn it on. And it'll go back to this.